My family has been very, very instrumental in the integration of businesses and institutions here in San Antonio.
A successful man in his own right, Chuck has a resume ranging from dishwasher at Kelly Air Force Base.
One day, Sergeant came in and said, "Charles, you've done a good job. I'm promoting you to dishwasher." And I almost cried. I was so happy. It was the first promotion I'd ever had in my life.
To CEO of multiple companies in radio and entertainment. Still, Andrews credits much of his success to his upbringing and the difference his family made in the community.
Well, I'm 81 years old now. And as I mature and as I age, every year that I grow older, I determine that my father was the smartest man that I had ever known in life, because he prepared his sons to survive in today's world.
Charles Andrews Sr. was a doctor, originally from Houston, Mississippi, graduated Howard Medical School in Washington, D.C., but made his mark in San Antonio.
My father moved here to San Antonio to practice medicine with his uncle.
He worked tirelessly for patients on the city's west side, regardless of race.
My father had the first integrated medical practice in the South or Southwest. And what he did was he simply opened up his office on the west side in an area where there were Mexican Americans, African Americans, Chinese Americans, Gypsy Americans, German Americans, and white Americans. And he just opened his office. He was the only doctor around. And so they came. And some of those non-Black patients of Dad's remained his patients for the 60-something years that he practiced medicine. And it was an amazing thing about Dad.
But of course, it wasn't always easy for Andrews and his family.
My mother was Smithy Sutton Andrews. They met here in San Antonio, and eventually they married. And they had me and 2 other children.
One of Chuck's earliest memories is one all too familiar for even young Black men today.
When I was 8 years old, that was in 1948, my father bought my mother a brand new 1948 Chrysler New Yorker. It was blue, had fluid drive and everything that you could possibly want on a car in 1948.
That summer, they were headed to visit family in a town called Idabel, Oklahoma, and had to pass through Greenville, Texas.
Greenville had a sign on either end of the highway, coming and going, that said, "Welcome to Greenville, Texas. We have the blackest dirt and the whitest people on earth." And so as we were driving through Greenville, we'd just about gotten through when we were pulled over. And we were pulled over because the policeman thought that he had seen a Black man driving a white woman in the front seat of a car. My mother didn't have any Negroid characteristics, no features as such. Mother looked like she was white. And so he stopped us. My mother and father tried to explain to the policeman that my mother was colored and not white. And the policeman would not accept that explanation. My younger brother and sister were in the car, both of whom were fairer than I. He called me a pickaninny and made my father and me get out of the car. And he handcuffed me to my father. And he made us walk to the edge of town. When we got to the edge of town where the sign was, he unhandcuffed us, told us never to come through Greenville, Texas again. It was the first and only time in my life I ever saw my father cry. Saw tears coming from my father's eyes, because there was absolutely nothing that he could do about it if he wanted to live. Obviously, we never went through Greenville, Texas again.
Meanwhile, the rest of the Andrews family used their differences in skin tone to garner change.
I said earlier that my mother didn't have any Negroid characteristics, and she did a lot in San Antonio to integrate various old institutions.
Like one of the fanciest restaurants in San Antonio, the Camellia Room inside of a department store called Joski's.
My mother had a friend, a very close friend. They were both members of League of Women Voters. And they decided that they were going to integrate the Camellia Room. And so they went. And then my uncle, G.J. Sutton, who very obviously was African-American, was black, color, whatever word you want to use, came to the entrance of the Camellia Room and tried to enter. And they knew who he was. He was kind of famous around here. They told him, "Mr. Sutton, we don't serve color in the Camellia Room." And he said, "Yes, you do. Mr. Sutton, you know we don't serve color in the Camellia." He said, You're serving colored right now. And what are you talking about? I said, my sister's in there eating right now. And who is your sister? And he pointed to my mother. So they went over to my mother and they said, excuse me, but there's a man at the front who says he's your brother and he wants to join you. And my mother looked around and said, oh yeah, that's my brother GJ. Let him in. They said, that's your brother? Yeah, that's my brother. And you know what? They let him in. And that's how the Camellia Room, the Joskies of Texas, got integrated.
And Chuck's siblings followed her lead.
My sister, whose name was Mary Lillian, wrote the letter to Woolworths to promise them that if they didn't integrate their lunch counter, that she was going to organize a sit-in to come there. They responded to her by integrating their lunch counter. We did not have sit-ins here in San Antonio because my sister, who was president of the Youth Council of the NAACP at that time, wrote a letter and got it done. My brother, Samuel Andrews, integrated the swimming pools here in San Antonio. And the way he did it was he simply went up, paid the 9 cents, and went swimming.
Equality was a message Chuck said his mother and father always instilled in their family.
And he wanted his sons always to remember the value of people. And so that's a thing that I've been proud of and that I've tried to instill in my children. And hopefully my sons are instilling that in their children.